joining us on a Saturday morning. I know that for some of you, this is a great effort, so it is great that you can be here today. I hope that you can enjoy what we have prepared for you. Just to tell you briefly, we are going to be dealing with some aspects of the history of the UK. But before we get started, I want to create a poll and check that all of you can hear me well. Okay, so that let's check that that is going on. So can you hear me well? Yes or no? So you can vote now. Okay. Very good. So far, most of you are saying yes. Absolutely clear. That's fantastic. Very good. All right. Let's see. Great. Okay. Very good. So nobody seems to be having any problems. So we can just go ahead and get started. So what we are going to do, I'm going to tell you a little bit of how we try to organize this webinar because, of course, you know that the UK is, well, the UK as a country is not that old, but Great Britain, England, the British Isles themselves, they are they're an extremely old territory with lots of history and lots of interesting stories to them. So what we're trying to do is summarize this in a user-friendly way in order to make it useful and well, hopefully you will enjoy it. So that's what we are going to do today. We are going to deal with some of the history we will get until the Tudors. Yeah, we won't have time for more than that because I'm trying to keep this short, but those of you who know me know that I speak a lot, so probably this won't be very short. So that's why I didn't add more things for this webinar, because otherwise we'll be here until 5 and probably most of you want to have lunch before that. So that's why we are only going to go up to there this time. Okay, good. So first we're going to, as I told you before, these are the different topics that we will be dealing with today. Yes. The first thing we are going to discuss are some questions about the UK now. What's the UK and what's its organization? And then, of course, we are going to go back in time and see how they got there. I mean, how they got to the Tudors, and then in the following episode, we will see how they got to where they are today. But that is the idea, for you to know and for you to see everything on a map, and so that you make sure you understand what territories we are talking about and well, all these things. So we are going also to see a timeline, yeah, a very brief timeline, and with not a lot of information, but just some ideas so that you keep the different periods of time in your mind, and you know that when we are talking about, I don't know, the Romans in Britain, we are talking about the beginning of the millennia, and we are not talking about the 1500s. So that is the idea, that you more or less know what is the time that we are talking about. Yeah, so that you can have an idea of that. We're going to talk about early inhabitants of the British Isles and some peoples that inhabited them originally. We are going to talk about the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings. Yes, there's a lot of things There are lots of things to say. We are trying to, again, keep it brief. So just some information about that. Then we'll go into the Normans and the Middle Ages. With some information of everything that happened there, and then we'll go into the Tudors. That those who know me, though, that like know that's my favorite part of history. So that's where we are definitely going to have more fun. So well, that being said, it's time for us to start with the quiz that we are going to have today. So we're going to see. Let's see how much you know about the UK. So I'm going to have some questions, and you're going to answer. Well, it's like a true or false situation rather than questions. So here we go with the first vote. Okay. So I'm going to create a poll for the first question, and you are going to say if this is true or false. Yes. The first question says the official name of the country is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So you have to vote, true or false. What do you say? Okay. Most of you, well, it's kind of divided, but I'll show you the results of the poll. Most of you say that the answer is true, and yes, the answer is true. People very easily call the country England or Britain or Great Britain, but the official name of the country is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Okay, so nothing else. Of course, you can just say the UK or the United Kingdom, but don't call them English, because half of them are not English and they definitely not like it. So, you know, Britain's is just fine. Good. Question number 2. The UK is made up of 4 nations: England, Wales, Scotland, and the Republic of Ireland. So off you go, vote. Okay, some people are taking some time to think because this seems to be a bit more difficult than the previous one. Okay. Well, some people still have not voted, but okay. So more or less the same answers that we thought, that's what we got. But I have to tell you that this time the ones that voted true are wrong. The answer is incorrect. It was very tricky, I have to admit, because the 4 nations are England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, not the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is the yes, that was a trick. Republic. The Republic of Ireland is the territory that is at the south of Northern Ireland, of course, with Dublin as the capital, and in Northern Ireland the capital is Belfast. So different countries. So the British Isles themselves have got 2 countries: the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, yes, the one in the north, and the other country is the Republic of Ireland. Okay, so that is a separate country, the one that now still remains in the European Union, unlike the United Kingdom, who has left. All right, good. And question number 3, Queen Elizabeth II is the longest serving monarch, or the longest reigning monarch, as I like to say. So let's see, is this true or false? Okay, some people are taking the time. I hope you're not Googling the answers. It's not fair if you do that, honestly. Okay. Well, most people say true, and that is correct. Very good. Yes. Um, Queen Elizabeth II is the longest reigning monarch. She's been queen for, oh, I think the other day she turned 60. Oh, poor thing. She's not just old, she is the longest reigning monarch. But yeah, in the last couple of days, it was the 66th anniversary of her coronation. And she was queen like one whole year before that. So she's been there for quite a long time. Quite a long time indeed. Okay, do you know who is the one that was like the longest until very recently, before Queen Elizabeth the second made the time? Like, let's see. I'm going to create another poll. It's not here, but I'm really interesting. Here's like for me to show how much I love it. So there was another monarch that was king or queen for more than 60 years. So, oh, some people are spoiling it on Instagram, but well, the options are, oh, I'm going to write the options, so it's taking me a long time. Let's see. The options are, there we go. So, those are the options that I'm giving you. Victoria, Henry VII, or Richard III? Who was the longest reigning monarch before Queen Elizabeth? Let's see. Some people are still voting. Okay. Nobody's going for Richard III. Poor Richard III. Well, we'll talk about him later on today, so we'll see. But okay, some people are not ready to commit yet. Come on. Oh, so far we've got a tie. But well, I will just publish the results. Yeah, so we've got most of you said Victoria, but it was really close to Henry VII, and the answer is Victoria. She was queen for 63 years. So there you go. The two longest reigning monarchs of this extremely old country are women. So that says a lot, doesn't it? Great. Very good. So that being said, we are going to move on to the next slide, in which I want to show you the organization. Okay, so basically in this photograph you can see the British Isles. Yes, that are a group of islands that are called that way. Here we have the biggest island, yes, the one that is called Great Britain. So that is the name of the island. So that is why it's very common that people get confused. But of course, yes, many times we call the country Great Britain, but actually Great Britain is the name of the big island. So these poor people there in Northern Ireland feel kind of sad. So go for the UK. That's always the safest choice, really. So well, here we have this little bit that is Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, of course, and these little parts is Wales. And I wanted to show you this. Again, this is the only thing that we are going to deal with connected to modern UK. But if you have a look at the flag, yes, this flag is called the Union flag or the Union Jack when it's on a ship. at sea. Otherwise, it's called the Union flag, though it's more commonly called the Union Jack, but like officially it's called Union flag. So it is formed, it's not very clear maybe, but it is formed by the combination of these flags. You see the English flag, that is like this one in the center. Then we've got the Scottish flag and the Northern Irish flag there. Well, the Welsh have got a very strange flag, so I guess they were not included. But yeah, they were the first ones to join England. So I don't know why that happened. But well, so this is the Union flag, and that is why we have that way. Okay, so here we get to the timeline. That is kind of what's going to organize what we are going to deal with today. We're going to start around 2500 BC. Yes, BC is before Christ. So it's very common that in that Spanish speakers will transform or translate acronyms into English in the same way that we say them in Spanish, but that can be confusing with English. So remember, BC is whatever happened before the year 0, and AD, which is Anno Domini, is what happens afterwards. Jesus Christ was born. So there you go. Okay. So we are going to deal with these people. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Beakers, the Celtic, the Romans, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Vikings, the Normans, and the Plantagenets. And today we will get up to the Tudors, but then of course you should know there comes the Stuarts, the Orange, and the Hanoverians, and well, the modern royal family. So this is a brief timeline. Yeah, I would like you to have this in mind so that when we go on, you will see how they interact. Just something that I wanted to mention basically is that, for example, at the time of the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings, they are combined. Like the Vikings went to the UK while the Anglo-Saxons were there, so it's not like the period finishes, but they get together, they are mixed. Okay, that being said, let's get started. Like some brief things about the UK geographically. It is connected to the mainland of Europe, so that is important because originally it was like literally connected. Then different, like millions of years happened in the middle, ice ages, etc. The land froze, it melted, etc. It flooded the canal, and now the British Isles are separated. But originally they worked together, so people could come and go as they did in the rest of the continent. So there have been people in the Isles for many, many years. So that's for you to know. All right. So we're going to talk about the early inhabitants. In this case, we're going to talk about the Beakers. So here you can see some pictures of the beacons, and I want you to see this before I move on, so that you can understand some of the things that they did. So like these things are probably very, very known to you. Yes, like this is Stonehenge, and well, this is just a guy, but Stonehenge is very famous. So what are the Beakers? They're a group of people from the mainland, yes, from the continent, that invaded the Isles in, well, as I said before, around 3000 or 2500 BC. So they were there. They with their culture, they introduced metalwork into the Isles, and they brought together with them. They were really good at doing things with metal, especially copper and gold. They were famous at the pottery, so that's why they are called Beakers, because they created these sorts of, I have to move the slides here. they created these sorts of beakers and well, vases and different things connected to these craftsmen. So that is why they keep that name. They their main thing was agriculture. They were people who did this agriculture. They lived in communities, and the interesting thing is that, well, they farmed, they live in huts, they had dogs, they live in a very peaceful way. The interesting thing, and maybe the reason why the beakers are more known, is that they are the ones that created, allegedly, Stonehenge in the south of England. Why do I say allegedly? Well, you know the stories. People say that they were aliens, and many other things. We really don't know. There's some historical background saying that it was probably this group of people who created the Temple of Stonehenge. That is this one right here. Maybe you have been there, maybe you have not. But if you have not, you have at least probably seen the photograph and you know what I'm talking about. These are gigantic stones. They are believed to be as heavy as 20 elephants. So they were moved over 150, well, miles, that's like 200 kilometers, I guess. So that's the question. That's why they say, how could these people, without any technology help or anything, how were they able to do this? That's where people go for, they were aliens. So, well, you know, that's up to you what you choose to believe. But, well, I would go for the beakers. Well, then we have another ancient or early, rather than ancient, group of inhabitants that were the Celts. The Celts are very famous. They spread throughout the land, and they moved into the Isles, like all through. They went to Ireland, to Scotland, and to England, where they created these little groups that were the Gaelic, the Picts, and the Britons. They were different groups. Yes, they were not united, though they had lots of common things. So there was a connection with them, especially, religion. Yes, they had similar language and similar religion. Their religion was Druidism, which is pagan, of course, for us. But they have very interesting theories and some things that we still do today. This is where we have the origin, the ancient origin of Halloween. You know, it comes from this time and from Druids. Again, their main industry was agriculture, though they were great at as well. They retire in age, exactly. They retire in age, so they were great craftsmen as well, making iron. They are famous for having these bracelets that were, you know, well, very, very famous. You've probably seen them all over. And well, they lived in huts. It was also very common at the time. So now we're going to talk about the following group of people that we have for today's presentation. These are the Romans. When we talk about English history, we don't really think so much about the Romans, because we're like, they were there like a long time ago and not for so long. So like, really, why to talk about the Romans? But there are really interesting things to say about the Romans. So here we have another trivia for you. Wait a moment, I'm moving the wrong slide. There we go. So here we have another trivia for you. The question is, what do you see here? And here we have option A, a Roman bath, option B, a Roman cemetery, option C, a Roman church. So I am going to create a poll and you are going to vote. A, Roman bath, B, Roman cemetery, and C, Roman church. Spoiler alert again. Okay. Oh, I see that there are quite interesting answers. Well, many of you got it right. Most, I would say. Yes, I thought it really does look like a pool, doesn't it? Yeah, I have to agree with that. Okay, so I'm going to show you the results of the votes for those on the form. Most of you are saying the Roman bath, the Roman baths. Some of you said a Roman cemetery, and some people say a Roman church. Well, those are very strange choices, honestly. These are clearly the Roman baths. The Romans were extremely famous for these baths, but we'll get into that in the next slide, because then I start with the ending. Okay, so interesting things about the Roman Britain or in the UK. So Julius Caesar was the first Caesar that tried to invade the Isles. Yeah, he tried this in 55 BC and he failed. He went back a year later with a bigger army, and he failed again. So, well, he decided not to continue with this idea. About 100 years later, Emperor Claudius, tried to invade the islands again. He wanted to get these islands because he wanted glory. And you see, he was definitely right, because we were talking about him today. So this is glory, isn't it? So yes, he was successful. He invaded the British Isles. They started their invasion in the south, and they moved upwards. They got up to what they called Caledonia. Caledonia is more or less what is now Scotland. Yeah, so they call that area Caledonia. We call the rest of the territory, I mean, like they call England Britannia because of the Britons who live there. So they called it Britannia. They founded London, that was called Londinium. And well, they did many other interesting things. And they stayed in Britain for almost 400 years. So when we think that the Romans were not there for long, well, we are, today is a holiday in Argentina. We are a very young country that's only 200 years old, roughly. So imagine these people were there for 400 years, and we think that it was not such a significant part of history. Oh my God, this is a very old country. Okay, great. So lots of things that the Romans did. Let's move on to the following one. Okay, let's see. So as I said before, I said that that London was called Londinium, and I want to tell you a bit of a story of. It's a very famous story. If you go to London, if you've been to London, you probably know the story. This story is about a Celtic queen called Boudica. Her husband was killed, her daughters were raped, and she decided to revolt against the Romans. So she did. She gathered an army and she went around different Roman towns, burning them down and killing everybody. But then she was defeated and killed herself. So yeah, it didn't really work out for Queen Boudica. Good. So the most important things that the Romans brought to England, the UK, the British Isles were towns. They created lots of towns and made them grandiose. They started building walls around towns. In London, you can still see some of the remains of the Roman wall. They created roads fun fact again, as I'm reading a fun fact in the chat. Fun fact for the Roman roads, they were the best roads in Britain until the 18th century. So these people, the Romans, created these roads like 2,000 years ago, and they were still being used until not so, long. So interesting. So yeah, they were very advanced, extremely advanced, much more advanced than the civilizations that would come after them. So they spoke Latin. That was a really interesting thing. That was different. The early inhabitants spoke these Celtic, Gaelic languages, which have transformed into what maybe now like Welsh, or well, we still call Gaelic in northern Scotland. But they introduced Latin, they introduced Christianity, which is a big change. Catholics really go all in. So trying to turn these people into Catholics was something really that really worked in their case. And they introduced their form of government. The Romans were very advanced with all the governments and political organization, and they tried to introduce that to the Isles so that people were organized in a more Roman and civilized way compared to the one that they had before. Typical things about the Romans, they were extravagant, so that's why they had these fantastic towns, etc. They had these baths. If you have been to England, if you have the chance, or if you had in the past to visit the Roman baths in the city of Bath, or well, if you're planning to do so, definitely do so. They are amazing. You can go to Bath and visit some of these baths. They're incredible. There's thermal water, naturally hot. You can drink it. It doesn't really taste very good, but you feel that you are drinking the same water than the Romans were using 2,000 years ago. So that sounds interesting. And well, they're like these baths are incredible, covered in marble, ornaments, lots of things that were extremely advanced at the time. And the rich Romans lived in villas, yes, these big houses. And the interesting thing was that some of them even had central heating, yeah, underneath the floors. There was a piping system for central heating. So as I say, extremely advanced in architecture. And well, of course, the Britons, now part of the Roman Empire, those things never changed. The rich Britons, they now started living like Romans, like rich Romans. So they went to the baths, they lived in these villas with central heating, etc. And the poor Britons just kept their life as it was before, with farms and trade as their main occupation. Let's see what we have next. We have another quiz time. Excellent. So, why did the Romans leave? If they were doing so great, if they had created these amazing roads that people used for 1,500 years more, and they everything was so great, why did they leave? So the options that we have are: other invaders attacked them, the Celts took back the land, or they had better things to do. So what is your choice? It's a hard one. Okay, some people are still not committing to the answer, but I'm going to show you this because it is very funny. I think this is my favorite question in the quiz. Most of people in our platform voted A, other invaders attacked them. That would make sense, but it's incorrect. Then the Celts took back the land. No, they didn't. They did not. The correct answer is C. They had better things to do. They did have better things to do because there was problem back at home. There were problems back at home. The central part of the Roman Empire was starting to crumble, so they sent everybody back to the continent to fight and try to keep their huge empire. Well, you know how the story ended, so they didn't make it. They should have stayed in England. So that's what happened. All right. And here we move on to the group of people that were arriving at the same time that the Romans were leaving, the Anglo-Saxons. Well, technically, we call them the Anglo-Saxons, but they were more tribes from Germanic, North Germanic origin that were getting to the Isles. The Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes. There's really not much information about the Jutes, like a debate because more people say we don't know what happened to the Jutes, but we always refer to them as Anglo-Saxons. So they were different tribes from Germanic origin, as I said, that moved into the British Isles. They started getting there at the same time the Romans were leaving. So I guess the previous one, you could think that A was possible, but no, because the Romans had like left a bit before, and then these ones came. So it's not that they massacred Romans. No, they just went in and, settled. Of course, they were not, they were not friendly. Don't get me wrong. They did kill lots of people because that's what every invader has to do in order to stay. But there were lots of things that the Anglo-Saxons brought into the country. So the first thing that you can say about the Anglo-Saxons is that they divided their land in 7 kingdoms. 7 kingdoms. Here we have some of them. Well, we have all of them, which is very funny for those of you who have seen Game of Thrones. This may sound familiar. This is all very similar to Game of Thrones. You will see that later on. So they divided the country in 7 kingdoms. They were not Christian, yes. They became Christian in the 5th or 6th century, most of them, because the Pope Gregory I, the Pope of Rome, of course, sent Augustine in a mission to convert them into Catholicism. Again, as I said before, the Catholics are very all-in kind of people, and they really, really outdo themselves. So in the area of Kent, they created, well, yes, like in The Last Kingdom, exactly. That's a great TV series if you want to know more about the Anglo-Saxons. The Last Kingdom, you can see it on Netflix. So they created Canterbury Cathedral in Kent. The cathedral still stands today, probably with some adjustments, of course, because the time things were not made to last centuries. But the cathedral still stands today. It's a Gothic cathedral. You can visit it. It is amazing. And it is still now one of the main PowerPoints in the Anglican Church of England. The Archbishop of Canterbury is like the highest person in their strange religion, well, apart from Queen. We'll get into that later on, you can imagine. Well, so as I say, became the power, the religious power in the UK. And then something that is also very very known about the Anglo-Saxons is Alfred the Great. For those of you who have seen another TV series that is Vikings, you will know that there was a lot of conflict between the Viking raiders that we are now going to talk about and the Anglo-Saxons. Alfred, one of them, one Anglo-Saxon king. Yeah, it is true. It is true. Yeah, most of what you see, I'm answering a question that is asking if it's true. Most of what you see in this series is actually true. Vikings is a series created by the History Channel, so it tends to be closer to reality than sometimes other series. But yeah, it is true. So Alfred the Great fought the Vikings, and well, I won't spoil what happens next because that's what we are going to see when we talk about the Vikings in some moments. Okay, so really easy question. You have to match some of the names of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms still are still here today. I mean, well, not here, but they remain today. So you have to match. It's very easy. As I said, you have to match these names of people with the names that we still have today for different counties in the UK. So I'm going to ask another question in the chat. So I'm going to say East Saxons. Who do you believe they give their name to? East Anglia, Sussex, Wessex, or Essex? I'm surprised at your answers. Okay. Well, I will. Yeah, I am surprised. Okay. I will show you the results now before. Interesting. Well, this is what you voted. I mean, people in the yes, people in the platform are voting crazy things. Some of you, 27% of you voted East Anglia. 30% of you voted Sussex. 13% voted Wessex, and 30% vote Essex. So Saxons. Doesn't it sound similar to Essex? I mean, I thought this was just too obvious. Apparently, it was not. So I'm great. I added these. So well, the answer is D, Essex. Surprising. Here we go with now I'm scared. With West Saxons. West Saxons. Where do you think they lived? The West Saxons. What territory do you believe, or how do you feel this territory is called today? East Anglia, Sussex, Wessex, or Essex? I think the answer is clear now. Clearer. We have no comments from people from Instagram. Nobody knows what the West Saxons did, apparently. Well, we publish the results now. This is very funny. Yes, Wessex. Wessex. West Saxons, Wessex. Great. Very good. This one was a bit easier, apparently. Now we go with the South Saxons. So that's the other question. South Saxons, you have to decide. Okay, good. Well, some people are still voting. Thank you, very good. We have there somebody that does have the answer. Okay, so I'm going to publish the results. Most of you voted Sussex. Very good. Definitely. Sussex is the answer. So, I don't want to say anything about Meghan and Harry, but they are the Duke and Duchess of Sussex now. So that's where they get their name. All right. And the last one, I hope there are no doubts in this one because it's the last one left. We have the East Anglia, the East Angles. And I guess what do we call that area now? A, B, C, or D? Okay. Well, some people are still answering, but I guess most of you got this one right this time. The answer is, of course, East Anglia, which, again, still territory nowadays. Yeah, definitely. All right, good. Moving on, we go into the Vikings. Very interesting, this group of people who came into the Isles. They arrived, as we saw in the timeline, about 800 AD. These people were Danes. Yes, they came from what is now Denmark or Norway. I mean, basically Scandinavian people. They're extremely famous for being violent. They had a terrible reputation until the TV series Vikings started making people like them, because really nobody liked them in history. But well, I guess that's with the TV series, people felt more familiar. They felt closer. They felt like they knew them a little bit more and they could understand their motives. Or, since it is a TV series, it's just fun that people kill everybody with axes. But well, there's more to say about the Vikings. Yes, I think it is Ragnar in the photograph. Who else are we going to choose if not the great Ragnar Lothbrok? Yeah, well, that is true that Asterix and Obelix were famous Vikings from the 90s. I don't know. I remember them from the 90s because there was a cartoon when I was a child. But yeah, Asterix and Obelix are also famous Vikings. Okay, so the Vikings. They're pirates and raiders, and that is what everybody knows. Vikings were extreme people that everybody hated, everybody feared. But well, there were other things. They had Ragnar and Lagertha. That was a love story in the TV series. So they were explorers and they were farmers. They had these incredible boats. Sorry. They were very fast, very agile. They would lead. They could move throughout oceans. And they were really great travelers. They went all the way to North America, which was crazy at the time. I mean, we are talking 800 AD. I mean, a long time ago. So they went all over the world traveling, but they really liked England. Really, they really liked the land of England. They thought it was a great place to farm, and they decided that they wanted to stay. So that was a problem. The term Viking, before I move on, because here it says it's also called Norsemen or the Danes. The Vikings are for history and like talking about it in the real way, like they were referred to as like the violent groups, the raiders, not the nice people just moved somewhere else to farm. Of course, many times in order to move to farm, they were there because somebody else had killed lots of people with enormous axes. But that was the thing, like the terrible reputation. People didn't want them, but then when they settled, they were normal people, farmers and people who wanted to live normal. They did have some strange customs, and very well, their culture was completely different to ours. So that's what's surprising in many cases for us. But they had like lots of gods, but well, so did many other civilizations. So they fought the Anglo-Saxons, and this is where I was talking about when we were talking about Alfred the Great. That was one of the things that made Alfred so great, is that he fought the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings, sorry, he won. But then he was a scholar, he was a very educated king, and he finally managed to agree with the Vikings in finding a way in which they could both coexist without the Vikings trying to invade Wessex and Mercia all the time, that were some of the kingdoms that were mostly attacked by the Vikings. Of course, here you can see in this map, yes, this little map, this part that is called the Danelaw, is that literally says like is like the land of the Danes, and it was the land in which Danish law prevailed, and that was what we're going to do. So like they could do whatever they wanted in their land as long as they stayed there. So they say that in their territory everything should be all right. But what happened? Well, they were explorers. They wanted more. They tried to go after Wessex again. King Alfred said, well, no, that's been enough. And he fought the Danes again and sent them a little bit backwards into their territory. And they started pushing them until like in about the last part of the previous millennia, they left. But of course, as Lucas is saying in the chat, they are very important because they were extremely knowledgeable in the area of sea navigation, and that had a great impact in the UK. It is extremely famous for being a very they are called by being pirates, so they are naval people. They live in an island though. So yeah, and well, so Alfred granted the Danelaw, then they abused it, and they kept moving back and forwards there for quite some time. Of course, all of us love the Vikings now, so please do watch the series if you haven't. Yeah, it's really, really, really great. Good. So what do we have here? Oh yes, language questions, the best type of questions. So all these peoples that have been in the Isles have a great influence on language, and what if we are not a school of English? So that's what we are really most interested in. So let's vote and see which of these words are not from Viking origin. Well, there's actually only one word that is not Viking or from Viking origin. I mean, there may have been some variations. So let's vote. A, B, C, or D. Which of these ones do you believe is not from Viking origin? This is harder. It is harder than Wessex and Sussex, right? I see the options are extremely divided. Okay, so I will publish what you have said. 28% of people said A, window. 24% said husband. 21% said pork. And 28% said Thursday. Well, I have to admit that only the ones that said pork are right, because yes, pork is from French origin, not from Viking origin. All the other windows, and this is all the other windows, all the other words, and this is funny for you to see how important and the extreme influence that the Vikings had in the in British history is to see those words. Yes, Katy, you're doing great. You're answering all the questions. Window, a word we use every day. Husband. And Thursday. Thursday was named after their king Thor. You may know him from the Marvel films, I think. I haven't watched them. But yeah. So pork was French. So it came on later. Very good. Nice. Vikings. Okay. So after the Vikings, well, not after the Vikings, but after the Vikings in the presentation. Yes, remember that the Vikings, as I said before, were at the same time and sharing their time with the Anglo-Saxons. So they lived at the same time. And now we're going to talk about the other group of people who joined or who went into this crazy amount of people that lived in the British Isles, that are the Normans. The Normans are it's a very interesting situation what happened to the Normans. There was an Anglo-Saxon king called Edward the Confessor, like this was 1066 when he died, so this was give or take 150 years after the death of Alfred the Great. Give or take. So Edward the Confessor was king of England at the time. There were 4 people with a possible claim of the throne because he died without children. So four people had a possibility of being crowned king of England. So what happened? They elected Harold Goodwill. He was the one that was chosen to by the people in order to move on to being king. So that being said, everybody was happy. Well, not everybody really. There was this king, Harold Hardrada, who was from Norway. And he remembered the time where the Norsemen were living in the British Isles and said, that's great. That's what I want for me and for my people. So he wanted to go back to England. He had some sort of claim to the throne. So he invaded England. He invaded the north of England and was ready to attack King Harold. So what happened? King Harold moved his army to the north. As he went to the north, he fought King Harold Hardrada and won. Yes. He won, but of course, you know, these Norsemen, they tend to come back. That's what happened to them many, many times before. So he and his army stayed there. More or less at the same time, another person with a possible claim to the throne of England decided that it was a good moment to invade the Isles. So that was William, the Duke of Normandy. So Normandy was, and you can see that in the photograph, Normandy was a territory in France, or what is nowadays France, yes, in which he was Duke. And he had a claim to the throne, so he said, I will go cross the English Channel and go into the Isles. So just a minute, I have to, there we go. I have to finish this Instagram story. No, Instagram. Sorry, no, Instagram. I'm sorry, this is taking me a minute. Okay, this is harder than it looks. Okay. Okay, I have to start again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is taking me so long. The ones that know me will know I'm terrible at technology. Okay, and I think here we are again. Okay, very good. So I'm going to set the slide again. Okay, here we are with the Normans. Excellent. All right, so sorry about that. Okay, so what I was saying, this the really interesting part of history starts now. So William the Conqueror moved into the British Isles. He landed at Hastings. You can see that on the chat. So he landed at Hastings. When King Harold finds out that the Duke of Normandy had invaded the Isles, he left the north in order to go to the south. But again, he was afraid of the Norwegian people. He was afraid of King Harald Hardrada, and he decided that he was going to leave half of his army, or more than that, at the north of England. So, well, the battle between King Harold and William, the Duke of Normandy, lasted only one day. It was the 14th of October, 1066. So you can imagine the battle lasted a day, the king died. So William was king. That's why we know him as William the Conqueror, because he liked to conquer places like England. So he became the new king of England. Just like that. King Harold died with, allegedly, an arrow to his eye. So you can imagine. That's a terrible way to die for somebody who's king. But it's not so strange. No. Kings died in battle before. All right. So what can we say about the Normans? They were great. They introduced lots of things into they built castles. Like, they were conquerors, they were invaders, so they knew that that could happen to them. So one of the big things they did is they built these massive castles all over the UK. If you go to the UK, you will still see that many castles still stand today. There are lots of small cities that have gigantic Norman castles or Norman city walls. Like, you will definitely see them. You can go and see Warwick Castle. That is the one that we have there in the chats, in the in the slides. You can see, if you go there, you can see the Canterbury Castle. Well, you can see the White Tower at the Tower of London. Like, the first parts of the Tower of London was built by Normans in 1069, if I am not wrong. So, they built gigantic castles, the Castle of York, many others. And they look similar to this one, to the Warwick one. Warwick is in an incredibly good condition. Many Norman castles are sort of in ruins or abandoned. There's not much inside of them. The case of Warwick was different because people lived there until recently. So these English people are very strange. So they introduced French into the courts, and that's a very interesting change in the English language as well. You have to understand that up to this point, the elites and the aristocracy, call it in a way, were Anglo-Saxons. Yes, they had been Celts, then they were Romans, then they were Anglo-Saxons, and now guess what? They're going to be Normans. So they introduced French because that's, in a nutshell, what these people spoke, or of course a very early version of French. So they introduced lots of French words to the English language, words like pork, like we've seen before. So this is why it's very funny, but in English we use, I mean, the Normans are the reason why in English we use the French fancy words when we're talking about cuisine, or when at restaurants, you don't say pig, you don't want to eat pig, you want to eat pork, or you don't want to eat cow, you want to eat beef, which apparently comes from French. And so happens with many other things. Very well. So that's something that the Normans did. So they changed that. The interesting thing was that the elites, the upper classes, would speak this Norman dialect similar to French, and poor people would go ahead and speak in that kind of English that they spoke, this very early English, that was a mix of Latin and Celtic and whatever language the Anglo-Saxons brought into the thing, and the Vikings. So the poor people would speak that extremely early English variety, and the rich and powerful would speak French. So that's the thing. Another very interesting thing, if we think about, again, they got there 1066. 1066. We can't even imagine that. That was like 400 years before Christopher Columbus came to America, so extremely long time ago. They ended slavery in the UK because the Anglo-Saxons did have slaves, and the Normans ended slavery. It's very, very interesting if we consider that slavery, well, I'm not sure if it's still possible right now, but it was possible until very, very recently in many other countries. So that is a very interesting thing that the Normans brought into the Isles and into the organization. And then we have Domesday Book. The Domesday Book was a survey that they did in the land, and they wanted to see how many people were living in the land, and what they were doing with the land, what crops they were growing in the land, and how the cattle that they have. And well, of course, all of this was for political reasons, and taxation, and all of those things that are very important for politicians in order to tax people more. Okay. So here we have an interesting story about the Normans and the Plantagenets, that are the dynasty that follows this. We get into the Middle Ages, and these kings were extreme warriors. As I said before, kings used to die in battle, and that is the case of some of the ones that we're talking about now. These three people are very important. You have King Henry II, who was who's related to William the Conqueror, of course. He married a French woman. Therefore, he had claim to some French territory. So they were originally from France, but then when they moved to England, they left some other people back in France. So they were not so friendly with them anymore. But then when he had some claim to land in France, of course, they sent an army, and they wanted to keep it that way. So this was very expensive. This is still true today, but we know that war is very expensive, and keeping an army in a foreign land is extremely expensive, and that's what happened in the case of Henry Henry II, his kingdom was not that great because he had to maintain this enormous army. His son, Richard the Lionheart, was famous because he was a crusader, and he wanted to defend this empire that his parents created. He lived most of his life, though, in Aquitaine with the mother in France. So allegedly, of all his reign in Britain, he was only there for 5 months. He died young, though. So, but anyway, imagine a king that has only spent 5 months in the land. So that's not so normal for us to imagine. But well, Richard the Lionheart wanted very badly to keep the French territory. That's where he had grown up. But he was also a crusader. He was a real supporter of the Pope of Rome, and he went on a great crusade. If you are familiar with crusades, you know that they wanted to go back to Jerusalem, and they wanted to spread Catholicism. Well, you know, I told you, Catholics are all in, so they would do anything in their power to make people Catholic. So Richard III went into foreign lands. He was very famous in Palestine area. He went to different places in Europe. He did not manage to recapture Jerusalem, but he became friends with the Sultan and with lots of people in the Middle East, so he was happy. But well, in a very silly battle, I mean a very insignificant battle, he was killed by a crossbow arrow, and there goes King Richard the Lionheart. So King Richard the Lionheart, as I said, he was a crusader, he was a warrior. He didn't have children, so he had no heirs. And that's where King John, his brother, becomes king. King John was very famous for being a terribly bad king. One of those that nobody likes. Of course, all of these wars, and as I have been saying, these wars are extremely expensive, and the Crusades are very expensive, and the Pope does not give you money just because you are helping them. On the contrary, you usually them. So they had no money. So what King John did was what every politician should know they shouldn't do. He raised taxes. But he raised taxes not only for the poor, he raised taxes for the barons, because the poor usually don't have any power. I mean, of course, he did raise taxes for the poor as well, but he also raised taxes for the barons, and the barons are the ones that can really rebel. You know, the barons, the feudal people that will collect taxes and money from their tenants, from the people who would farm in their land, and they would live in these palace-like castles and lived a good life. So the barons, that were the aristocracy at the time, rebelled against the king. There were lots of riots, and they got into bloody fights. And they finally agreed, or they kind of forced King John to agree to the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is a charter, is a document, basically, that states, long story short, that everybody should stick to the rules and has to obey the law, and even the king. That was not very common at the time, and it was this was a time of absolutism around Europe, and this was different. This was like the end of absolutism in the UK. Yes, you're making me hungry too, talking about croissants, so please. So absolutism was over, the Magna Carta was in place, and it was such a forward document that, in fact, when it's like a constitution. Yes, it is like a constitution. Funny enough, the Magna Carta valid now in the UK. You know, these are very special people. Of course, there have been some amendments to the Magna Carta, but they stick to something very, very similar to it nowadays. It's like their constitution, something very similar to the original Magna Carta. And apart from that, talking about constitution, yes, really, the Magna Carta was kind of like the basis of what the Americans used for their constitution when they gained independence from the Great Britain, the UK, etc. So really interesting how well the Magna Carta then backfired when they lost the 13 colonies. But well, anyway, the Magna Carta was a significant moment, the end of the time in which kings could do whatever they wanted because they knew now that somebody was looking, you know. So that's an interesting concept if you think about the time and if you think of what that could mean for different people and for people at the time. You know, they did have some rights. That was incredible at the time. Individual rights for people. What's that? Yeah. So that's an interesting change. And then a very silly question. Who's this? And then I see why this is a horrible picture, but I guess it is one that everybody will understand. Who's this? Well, for those don't know, this is Robin Hood. Why do I put Robin Hood? I know that some of you may not be a fan of this, but Robin Hood, who is famous for stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. He lived in Nottingham. He lived in the forest, etc. Because he was an outlaw. But the interesting thing about this is that the history, the background history that's going on is true. You can see it depends on the story of Robin Hood that you choose. You could see Richard the Lionheart. You could see King John. You see the rebellion, the barons. You can see the signing of the Magna Carta in a very, Hollywood, funny, interesting kind of way. So, you know, it is a way, of course, it may not be 100% accurate historically, but it will give you like a really, really good insight and of what life was like at the time. So I think it is very interesting to, if you're interested in history, and you must be, because otherwise you wouldn't be here today, you would see that all these films may not be, as I say, 100% accurate, but they will give you lots of information of things that you may be interested in. All right. Very good. So then we go into the following topic. I laugh because I know that there's a question about this and it's a very funny question. So that's why I'm laughing. I'm sorry. Okay, so then we have a period that we call the 100-Year War. There was a series of wars, a series of conflicts between France and England. As I keep saying, they are famous for not liking each other. You can see a timeline here. Yeah, so they're extremely famous for not liking each other. They have never liked each other. You know that if you go to France, you shouldn't speak English because they will not be friendly. If you didn't know, now you do. So basically, they started when the King of France died, and the current king the King of England at the time had some sort of claim to the throne. So he went on, and well, conflict started. They started fighting. Some won, some lost. Well, long story short, this was a very long war, and then the English lost their land in France. But the funny thing comes here. There is a question for you to answer. How long was the 100-Year War? So, option A, 100 years, of course. Option B, less than 100 years. British people love to exaggerate. Option C, more than 100 years. British people are a bit modest. So, I'm going to create a poll for you to vote A, B, or C. People on Instagram can by writing the answers in the chat. It's a hard question. It is tricky. There's one person on Instagram that always gets the answers right, and I feel very bad because somebody may think that we have cheated. But yeah. All right. So I will publish the results. That I'm happy because they shifted. Originally, the correct option was way behind. So 100 years, of course. No, definitely not. Less than 100 years. British people do love to exaggerate. Well, no, really. British people do love to exaggerate, but they exaggerate because they take a very long time for everything they do. The 100 Years' War was actually 118 years. So they were 118 years at war with France. Oh my God, no wonder they hate each other. Yeah. All right. So that was a hard one. Okay. Interesting time, more time of war. The War of the Roses. Yes, the one that we all love. The War of the Roses. Again, lots of conflict, and this is very common throughout Europe, I would say, or throughout the world, because when there is when it's not very clear who should inherit the throne, people start saying, "Well, me, no." Why you? If it could be me. I mean, who's going to really say, no, you go ahead and sit on the throne? Well, most people wouldn't. So that's why they start wars against each other. So we have a very interesting war here between the houses of Lancaster and the houses of York and the House of York, the House of Lancaster and York. So what happens? The King of England died, and his son, his eldest son, died before him. So something very strange happened. That is that like the succession skipped a line, skipped like a whole generation, and the crown went directly to the Black Prince, or to the Death Prince that was called the Black Prince, son. So, well, everything was okay at the beginning. His uncles were helping him, but then he didn't like that so much. So, they started fighting. This is an extremely long conflict and complicated, so I'm not going to get into details. There's lots of information about this online or in many other places, so you can ask me if you need further information. But if we get into this, I promise you will not be home for lunch or probably tea time. So, well, basically it started fighting one against the other. They took the throne, and here I'm going to show you the following slide. Okay, so here we see how when we see red, that meant that the Lancasterians were in power. When we see white, that would be that the Yorkists were in power. So they came back and forth and over a series of conflicts, and well, then eventually someone was victorious. We will get into that in a bit. But what happened? For me, the most interesting thing about the War of the Roses is like when we're towards the beginning, this is a period that lasted 30 years. So towards the end of the War of the Roses, we have these very strange people, as you can see. Richard III and the Two Princes. Do you know the story of Richard III and the Two Princes? Well, if you don't know the story of Richard III, you should definitely read it in William Shakespeare's Richard III. Great playwright, in case you didn't know. But he's got lots of bloody stories. They are still very very modern and very interesting nowadays. Believe me. So Richard III, terrible guy. One of the most hated kings of all time. What happened? His brother died, Edward, leaving two young princes, as we can see in this photograph. This is a later portrait of the princess, of course, but we could see in the we can see here in this portrait the princes. So they lived with their mother when their father died, but Richard, that was the brother of the king, said, no, I'm going to take the kids with me. So he took the kids from their mother, sorry, and he went on to rule England. He was crowned King of England only a couple of months after his brother had died, and he locked the two princes in the Tower of London. So, the Tower of London was really important. So it was used as a political prison many times. So that's where they were locked. So they locked the princes in the tower, and they were never seen again. So Richard III is not a very loved king, because who knows what could have happened, right? Should he have not done this. But the princes were never found. Their bodies were never found until 200 years later. A box with some remains, or would look like remains, was found in the White Tower, in the Tower of London, in a small place. That was covered with some stones. They found a box with what could be the remains of the princess. It has never been proved that's actually those are actually the Hi, I'm back. I'm back. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I am back. Believe it or not, these things that can only happen. Oh my God. Um, there was a power cut in my house. Like, oh my God, what are the chances? So yeah. There was, yeah, definitely. There was it was not the cable company. It was that there was a power cut. So yeah, I'm back. Um, so let's see. So okay, I was talking about the princes. Um, it's very hard to connect everything at the same time. All right, so the princes. That's what I was saying. So basically, they don't know really if the princes are the ones that are locked in the tower, that were found in the tower or not. But as I said, I choose to believe they are. Right. And well, of course, as I said before, you can always go ahead and read Richard III if you want more information on this very interesting time in history. So this was, in a way, I would say, the end of the War of the Roses, but not necessarily here. The War of the Roses ended by the, again, very interesting life, Richard III's. It ended with Richard III's death. So the person who followed Richard III, and is where we get towards the last part of our presentation today, the person who followed Richard III in the throne was Henry VII. Yes, Henry Tudor or Henry VII was the one that finally defeated defeated King Richard at battle and ended the war of the Roses. Why? Well, because he had claims from the Lancaster side of the battle, and he, well, of course, killed the current king that was, or the current king at the time, who was Richard III, and he was very smart, and he married Elizabeth of York. So he united the houses of Lancaster and the House of York together, and there was no more dispute over there. So if you see before, let me see where it was here. In this slide, as I have shown you, that we have the Lancasterians with a red rose, then we have the Yorkists with a white rose, and this is what we call the Tudor rose, because it's a combination of both Lancaster and York. Isn't that great? So Henry united the houses of Lancaster and York, and after a 30-year civil war of conflict, England was finally in peace. So, you know, it was great. Nobody wanted to dispute that. So what happened with Richard VII? Well, Richard VII is a quite decent king. He was quite modest. He didn't do anything. He was prudent. He was cautious. He was financially a good manager. He was great, and that was very good for the period that was to come. That was what we call Tudor England, or even later on Elizabethan England. So this was the Tudor rule in England was a period of time in which there was great economic thrive, advances, and lots of things that made them great. So Henry Tudor, Henry the Seventh, it's very common to say Henry VIII. Henry the Seventh was the one who ended the War of the Roses, father of Henry VIII, of course, the rockstar of kings, and the one that laid the foundations for all the wealth that was to come in the following years. And we start with the great Henry VIII. As I said before, the Tudors were a great dynasty. But I think that Henry is the one that makes them more famous. He's very famous because he had many wives. We'll get into that later. He's the second son of Richard VII. So he cheated British royalty since the beginning. He was he was not supposed to be king, all right? Like, he was not supposed to be king. He just his brother died. He inherited the throne of his brother, and he managed to be king. The interesting thing is that he not only inherited his brother's crown, he also inherited his wife. I mean, technically inherited his wife. His wife was Catherine of Aragon. Then we will get into the wives into more detail. But his wife was Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon was a Spanish princess. She was the daughter of the Catholic kings of Spain. So she was a very good match for any king at the time. And at that time, Spain was the biggest superpower. They had the biggest empire. So that's who you want to be friends with. So when his brother died, Henry's parents advised that he would marry his wife. So he did marry Catherine of Aragon. Of course, she was a widow, so they married with the permission that was granted by the Pope of Rome. So everything was done in perfect order. Young Henry was very athletic. He was intelligent. He was a scholar, a musician, a poet. He was great. Everything that a great king needs to be. But so what happened? Well, that's not what he's famous for. But anyway, he was a great king for many years. But he has two big, really driving ambitions. Those were being a rival of the great kings of or great leaders of Europe, like the Holy Roman Emperor, the King of France, the King of Spain. He wanted to be just as powerful as they were. And also, he wanted a male heir. So you may know this story. That's what he wanted, basically more than anything else. That was a male heir. So that is why his story is so famous. And that is why, well, I don't want to say anything, but he also created the Church of England. So let's see what we have next. We have a trivia again. He created the Church of England and broke with the Roman Catholic Church. Why? We have three questions or three possibilities. Those are: A, he didn't like the Pope at the time. B, he wanted a divorce and the Pope wouldn't let him. C, he didn't want to pay taxes, so he wanted to avoid paying taxes. So what do you say? A, B, or C? Okay, see lots of people voting in the chat. So let's see. Most people, very interesting. The options being he didn't like the Pope at the time, he wanted a divorce and the Pope wouldn't let him, or in order to avoid paying taxes. Most people chose he wanted a divorce and the Pope wouldn't let him. Very, very good. That is why he broke with the Church of Rome. He, we will see this now when we talk about the wives, but basically, King Henry really wanted to get rid of his current wife, or his wife at the time, Queen Catherine of Aragon. So he got it. You know, if the Pope doesn't let you get a divorce, what do? Oh, you're right. You create your own church and you give yourself a divorce. Isn't that what you would do? So, he had 6 wives. Okay, so that's why he's extremely famous. Many people sometimes believe he had 8 wives because he's Henry VIII, but actually he had 6 wives. Okay, so 6 wives. The first wife, and the one that he was married for the longest period of time, was Catherine of Aragon. This one that I was telling you about, Catherine of Aragon, who was the daughter of the Catholic kings of Spain. She was a great woman. She her only job was to serve the king. Her duty was to be by his side and give him a male heir, which she failed to do. So in King Henry's idea, one of the reasons why maybe he was not able to produce a male heir, and as I said before, this was what he wanted more than anything, to secure the rule, because we've seen in the past that when who the successor is going to be is not really clear, that can create political turmoil and is not the best thing for the country. So Henry had a point when he said, I really, really want a male heir. So the reason why he broke with the church was he wanted a divorce. He wanted a divorce from Catherine of Aragon. But as I said before, she's the daughter of the Catholic kings of Spain. So that sounds like they were committed to the church. And I also said that the Catholic kings, or that the Spanish kingdom or empire was the biggest and wealthiest at the time. So the Pope thought that it was not a great idea to give this young king what he wanted, and it was safer to side with Spain in this aspect. So he said no. Like, people, you know, come and go, or went and go for some time, and no, the answer was still no. And he really, really tried, but he didn't manage to get that divorce. At the same time, there was this new move, the Protestantism was starting in the continent with Martin Luther. So, you know, it was possible to create something new. So Henry said, interesting, that's what I want to do. And that's what he did. He created his own church, called the Church of England, in which he was like the Pope. So he was the king, the Pope, and everything. So being like the Pope and like the maximum authority from the Church of England, he could definitely give himself a divorce, because who else is going to do it? So he gave himself a divorce and therefore married wife number 2, the one that told him, if you leave that old woman, that I am young and pretty, will give you the male heir that you so desperately want. So that's what he did. He got a divorce from poor Catherine of Aragon, and he married wife number 2, Anne Boleyn. So Henry and Catherine did manage to get one surviving child. That was a woman, Princess Mary, later called Lady Mary, because when they divorced, King Henry forgot absolutely about Princess Mary. So she was not a princess anymore. She was practically nothing. And well, he married this woman, Anne Boleyn. And she got pregnant very quickly. And well, this was the time in which he was going to get the boy that he always wanted. But no, it was a girl. So that was such a disappointment. I mean, imagine if you're King Henry. You consider leaving your wife that was maybe not so common at the time to like get a divorce. You asked for a divorce to the Pope of Rome. He says no. You invent your own church in order to get a divorce because this woman tells you she's going to give you a son, and she fails to do that. So, well, you can imagine that that Anne Boleyn did not stay friends with Henry for much longer. So King Henry decided that she was not so good anymore. And after many accusations of treason and different stories, he found a perfect excuse to get rid of her. He got her beheaded. What is beheaded? Well, they cut her head off. They chopped her head off her body. So yeah, that's what happened to Queen number 2, Anne Boleyn. Where did this happen? Well, of course, it happened in the Tower of London, where I told you prisoners would go. The important ones, the not important ones would probably go somewhere else. But the important prisoners, Sir Thomas More, who's also from this period of time, Cardinal Wolsey, like all these important Tudor prisoners who were connected to the monarchy went to the Tower of London. So that's it. Anne Boleyn lost his head. Because, of course, Henry had his eye on another young lady. He had an eye on a pretty young lady called Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour had she came from a family of kind of Protestant tendency, so it was very convenient for Henry to find a woman who was not so fond of the Catholics anyway. So he marries Jane Seymour because guess what? She said, "I'm going to give you a son. That's what you always wanted," and she does. She gets pregnant. She delivers a boy called Edward. So everybody's happy. Well, not so long. She dies very soon after childbirth because of an infection. So yeah, that goes the wife that he really liked. So she died, but she died fulfilling her duty of a queen, that is giving the king a son. So that's what happened. She died very soon, extremely soon afterwards. Henry was still obsessed with getting more male heirs because one is never enough. There's why they say that every king needs an heir and a spare. Yeah, an heir and a spare. So if something happens to the first one, you have the spare one to crown king. So he needed another son. He had 2 daughters anyway, but he needed a son. So he marries a woman that they like literally recommended. Thomas Cromwell and some advisors of the king at the time recommended this woman. She was German, she was Protestant. It was very convenient, but she was in let's say Germany, in the region of Cleves. So she was there. He was in England. He was really not in the mood for traveling or anything. So they sent a portrait. You know, a portrait was, well, like the selfie of the moment. So a painter painted a portrait of Anne of Cleves, and they put it on a ship and sent it to England. So when Henry saw Anne of Cleves, he was delighted. He said, "This is the woman I want to marry. Not so she's convenient, but yeah, like Tinder, exactly. Not only she's convenient, but she's pretty. Excellent match made in heaven." So everything was arranged. They have decided they were going to get married. Excellent. Everything is fine. Anne of Cleves arrives to England. She gets there. Henry is reported to have said, "I do not like her." And you know, he's a very hard king to please. But well, he also knows that his duty is to his kingdom. So he does marry Anne of Cleves in order to avoid any conflicts and to see if something could happen. But they got married, but actually that marriage was never consummated because they didn't like each other. She said he had terrible smell because he had a very serious injury in his leg. So he had gangrene. He was very fat at the time already. So he was not the best match for her either. So he didn't like her. So, well, that's it. Divorce again. But this time was much easier because he could do it himself. He didn't need to go to Rome back and forth. I mean, that's it. I don't like her anymore. I can get a divorce. That's what Henry said. So he divorced Anne of Cleves, but they stayed friends. I mean, good job, Anne of Cleves. Probably that's what, what saved her. So that's what happened to Anne of Cleves. But Henry does not give up. Like, he really, really, really wants another male heir. So he marries again. Catherine Howard, Queen number 5. Second Catherine. That's kind of strange, but still. He marries Catherine Howard. She didn't like him at all. She was extremely young when she married this 50-something-year-old king, which 50-something may not sound old now, but we're talking about the 1500s, so that was old. Like, it was like very old. So he did marry her. Allegedly, this marriage was consummated, but apparently Queen Catherine had interest in other men, not only in the king. And in case you didn't know, just in case you don't want to try that, being unfaithful to the King of England, or to any other king probably for that matter at that time, was considered treason. Do you remember what happened to people who commit treason? Spoiler alert. Similar to what happened to Anne Boleyn. So guess what? Wife number 5 has the same, gets the same fate that wife number 2. She's sent to the Tower of London, and she lost her head again. Another one that lost her head. Okay, so now extremely old. Henry wants to marry once more, and he does. He finds Catherine number 3, wife number 6, Catherine Parr. This one, anyway, it was a more experienced woman. It was not like the previous ones that were maidens. Catherine Parr had 2 dead husbands already, so this was her 3rd marriage. So she was more experienced. She was more mature. She was able to care for the king. You know, again, as I said before, Henry was old. He had every disease you could have because he was, you know, a Don Juan. So he went around playing with different women, apart from all these that he had married. So, as I said, he had absolutely everything from syphilis to absolutely everything else. So, you know, he was not, I mean, he was king, but he was not the greatest catch. And he has a tendency of, you know, so he was like his nurse, exactly. But she's really important in the thing that I'm going to say next. Like, she was very important because, as I said before, when King Henry divorced Catherine of Aragon, sorry, he like discarded Princess Mary, and then he did the same with Princess Elizabeth, and he only cared about little Edward. That was not a very healthy boy, so he didn't really pay much attention to his daughters. So Catherine Parr was really important because she, being a wiser woman and an older woman, she was more experienced, and she got them together again. Like, they, in a way, reunited. They were not a happy family ever, clearly, but they had a much better relationship among the siblings and with their father as well. So, well, it's very important what she did. And of course, she was a nurse. She cared for him. She did all the things that none of the others could have done. Well, maybe Catherine of Aragon. She was a keeper. So this is the story of the wives, but this one survived. So the funny thing, and this is like a fact, like this is true. There's this rhyme in English. That's why we put Peppa Pig with a crown there. This is a nursery rhyme, a rhyme that kids are taught at school in order to remember the order of a king's wife. So the tune is something like divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So in that way, if you repeat that many, many times, you will remember what was the fate of the wives of Henry. So repeat after me. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Funny, isn't it? These British, I told you they're funny. Okay, and so we have these children. Yes, we have Princess Mary, the oldest. She's the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She is Catholic, of course. Her grandparents are the Catholic kings of Spain. She was raised in a Catholic environment because King Henry was a defender of the faith for the Roman Church of the Catholic Roman Church until he decided to separate. But she was raised Catholic. Her mother was an extreme Catholic. She was praying all the time, like Catholic, super Catholic as you can be. Then we have Princess Elizabeth. She's the middle child. Princess Elizabeth was there because I mean she's not Catholic because her family, in order to be able to get married, her parents broke with the Church of Rome. But when Anne Boleyn was around, the Church of England was not so distant to the Church of Rome yet. So at the time they were quite similar. So they had many similar things, like they had like a sort of Bible that was very similar to the Catholic one. So, you know, it was very similar. But for the Catholics, she was an illegitimate child. So she would definitely go for, I'm from the Church of England. And then we had Prince Edward. Prince Edward, whose family from his mother's side were mostly Protestants. So yeah, he was definitely Protestant too. So here we go into the children of Henry and what happened. So as I said, Edward was the one that was king when Henry died. Henry died, Edward was king, not really old enough. He was 9 years old. I mean, can you imagine? Think of any 9-year-old that you know and make him king of a country. Yeah. You know how that goes. After that, his uncle, yes, Edward Seymour, was the one that started to help him, guide him. He was protector of the realm. You know that when a child is king, there is a person, an adult, that reigns on their behalf. So this was his uncle, an extreme Protestant. The problem was that King Edward VI was a very weak child. He had everything he was to have, and since he was a little boy, he was extremely concerned. His parent, well, his father was extremely concerned about his health because he was the only boy. So he wanted to care for him. So he received like lots of extravagant treatments. And well, he lived a very strange life surrounded by doctors, and they kept him like in a cage so that he would be safe, and nothing would happen to the glorious son. But he was so well kept that he died at the age of 16. So when he died, of course, he didn't have any children because he was a child himself. But before he died, like he knew that after himself, or rather his Seymours, who were extreme Protestants, they knew that the closest person with a claim to the throne of England after them was Mary, Lady Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, the Catholic one. So that was something that they definitely didn't want it. So like they definitely didn't want, again, a Catholic queen. So what do they do? Well, there was this woman, Lady Jane Grey, who was the great niece of Henry VIII. So they say, well, she could have some claim to the throne. She's related to Edward. She's related to Henry. So why not? So they reroute the crown so that it would go to Lady Jane Grey, and so it did. When Edward dies, Lady Jane Grey is named Queen of England. But well, that didn't last very long. It only lasted, wait for it, 9 days. So yeah, she's known in history as the 9-day queen. Because this woman comes back, Queen Mary, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She said, what? This girl, I mean, forget it. She was ready to be the queen that the country needed. What did the country need? Well, they definitely needed a Catholic queen that could get rid of all those Protestants that were ruining the country, because, Catholicism is the one true faith. So that's what she said. I will get rid of absolutely all the Protestants in the kingdom. So how did she do that? She married Philip of Spain, the King of Spain, who was extremely powerful and extremely Catholic. So he said, she decided to marry this extreme Catholic. And at that time, many of the remaining Protestants rebelled and decided that it was time for a revolution and to restore Lady Jane Grey. That, as I said before, guess where she was? Have you guessed? She was locked at the Tower of London, of course. Where else? So she was in the Tower of London. But when this happened, Mary said, well, it was enough of this Lady Jane Grey thing. Enough. So what she did was kill her. She didn't kill her initially because Lady Jane Grey was 16 years old when she became queen, and therefore when Mary took her out of the throne. And it doesn't really look good to kill a 16-year-old girl. But when she married the King of Spain, this was somewhat 2 years later. She was a bit older, nearly 18. She could kill her now. So she did. She killed Lady Jane Grey, her husband, her father, and many other people. So that there was no doubt that she was the queen, like Mary. Apart from this, she killed, burned lots of Protestants, bishops, people connected to the church, old resistance from the normal folk. Well, that's what gave her the name, Bloody Mary. So that's why she's very, very famous. Basically, she restored Catholicism into England. And now we get into my personal favorite. That is, I don't know if you can see this. There you go. Which is Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth, the second daughter of King Henry. Queen Elizabeth was the daughter of King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. She, of course, had to go back to the Protestant ideas, because under Catholicism, again, remember, she was a bastard. So a bastard would not really have a good claim to the throne, or at least it would be more easily disputed. So at the end of Bloody Mary's life, they made amends. They became friends and sisters again, and well, they lived not happily ever after because Mary died, but they stayed friends. Mary made her successor, so Queen Elizabeth I was elected, or well, anointed queen. So Queen Elizabeth's reign was great. She was an extremely long reigning monarch. She reigned for almost 40 years, which is very interesting because Henry wanted a strong heir. That's why he wanted a man. But Queen Elizabeth proved that you don't need to be a man to be a great ruler, because she was a great ruler. The country was great during her time. She was, well, Henry's daughter. She was smart. She was athletic. She was an intellectual. She loved reading. She spoke lots of languages. She was into music, poetry, the theater. You know that this is Shakespeare's time. So Elizabethan England was full of theaters where people could go and enjoy life. So it was a great period in British history. There were some conflicts though, and some things that make Elizabeth famous. One of the most famous things that the things that make her more famous is that she never got married. She never got married for many reasons. First of all, at that time, if she married somebody, that somebody would become the king. And she was not going to let that go. She was the one in power. And no, she didn't want anybody being more than her. So she chose not to. She would also feel that she would leak her independence. And there are many versions of many people that she actually loved or had some relationships with, but it's never been proven. She claims she's the Lord. She's the Virgin Queen. That's how she calls herself, the Virgin Queen. She says she will remain virgin. She got married to England. So that's what happened. She got married to England, never to any man. Another very interesting thing of Queen Elizabeth's reign was her rivalry with Mary, Queen of Scots. We're not going to get into Scots history here because, like, it's the whole period that we've been talking about for the other countries, so that's a lot. So Mary, Queen of Scots, long story short, descended also from Henry VII, lived in France because there were riots in Scotland, married the French king, who died very young. So she was, well, kind of didn't know what to do. She went back to Scotland. But when she claimed that when she said that she could also claim the Catholic, the English throne because she was Catholic, so the Catholics wanted her in Elizabeth's throne. Elizabeth said, no way, literally no way. She had her imprisoned for many years. Like, she spent a great many deal of years imprisoned until Elizabeth finally executed her. So that was like her biggest mistake, or maybe a regret, but well, they were cousins. There were times in which apparently their relationship was not that bad. They exchanged letters and stuff, but they never met in person. Elizabeth had her in prison for many years, and then executed her without not even knowing, without not even meeting her personally. That's what I mean. During Elizabethan time, these extremely great military and naval power grew. Britain became a superpower at sea. So that is also help from Sir Francis Drake, was a very famous salesman, and that made the British very powerful, or the English very powerful, and that really bothered the King of Spain. So the problem was that British ships were, well, there were pirates, of course, because why not? There were pirates, they were stealing everything from others, and also they were getting more, let's say, legal things connected to transportation, going to the Americas, sending slaves. Like, they wouldn't own slaves, but they would pick up slaves from Africa and take them to North America, and different things. And that really angered the King of Spain. And so he sent the Spanish Armada, and as I said before, Spain was the biggest superpower at the time, and will send thousands of ships to the coast of England in order to fight Queen Elizabeth. Different things happened, and Queen Elizabeth won. Interesting fact, like she was there, she was in disguise, of course, because she's very distinguished, and she was a woman, but she was there at the battlefield. She not necessarily fighting, but she was trying to cheering soldiers and trying to help in any way she could. Then, of course, she was not that young, so it's not that she stayed for battle, but she had lots of reports and things that were going on at war. They defeated the Spanish Armada, and that's like one of the last things Elizabeth did because she was quite old at the time. She's very famous. She you can see many things connected to this Tudors if you go to England. Funny enough, that's something that I always find paradoxical, is that Queen Elizabeth is buried in Westminster Abbey in London. So if you go to London and you go inside Westminster Abbey, you can see Elizabeth's burial place. The interesting thing is that she's buried together with her sister Mary. So like Mary underneath, Elizabeth is on top, and there's like these great shines surrounding them. And there's only one marble stone craft with Elizabeth's shape. Like there's like literally no way for you to know that Mary is also there, like her sister. And when Elizabeth died, as I said before, Elizabeth didn't get married, and if you don't get married, you cannot have a son. If you are a woman, probably men could do that, but at the time it was not possible for Elizabeth to have any heirs of her own. So funny enough again, the person that was closest in line of succession was James of Scotland. He was James the Sixth of Scotland and James the First of England. So he was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, who had been executed by Elizabeth. So, well, when Elizabeth dies and they invite him to be King of England, well, who says no, being King of England, right? So he said yes. And he left Scotland. It was very cold, horrible. People were scared, never went back. He stayed in England and he loved it. But he built, like, right next to the chamber where Elizabeth and Mary are buried, an even better one for Queen Mary, Queen of Scots. So if you go to Westminster Abbey, you can see that they are Mary, then Elizabeth, and like right next to them is Queen Mary, Queen of Scots, who was murdered or assassinated by Elizabeth, and they're all lying together right there at Westminster Abbey. So this is everything we are going to deal with today. I was planning to do this in under an hour. I don't know what happened to me then. I actually think that I can do that. I never managed to do that. But well, I want to show you a timeline, yes, of the rest of what happened afterwards. Yes, we have the Stuarts, as I said. James, the son of Queen Mary, Queen of Scots, is his surname was Stuart. In Spanish, they are called Estuardos, so you may know them by that name. So the Stuarts, the House of Orange and Hanover, and the current modern family that are the Saxe, Gotha, Gotha. I don't know how to speak in German, and Windsor. Yeah. So this is on for the following time that we meet. And now, question time. I don't know if you have any questions or if there's anything that you would like to know. I'll allow some minutes for some questions in case you want to. Any questions? No questions, I guess. All right. Well, oh, somebody is writing. Some people are writing. Oh, I'm just writing no questions. All right. Good. So we'll meet again to discuss the rest, like the remaining parts of this history that we've been talking about. I would like you to let me know if there's anything in particular that you are interested in from the things that we have dealt with today. If you would like to know, like, how can I learn more about this or that, I can recommend film series and many other things. There's lots of information on YouTube. There are great videos like Fast, but you can watch them many times and you see. There's a question. I think that the English people are proud of that's our history. I guess that is their history. I don't think they are proud of our history as Argentinians, but their history, yes, I do think that they are proud of. Yes, they are proud of their. They are definitely proud of their history. They know a lot of their history. They love their country. And that is why, I mean, being such an old country, when they go anywhere in the world, they're like, we've got everything older than that. So yes, they are extremely proud. They love that everybody speaks their language, and yeah, definitely, yeah, they are definitely proud of their history. They have great monarchs. There are many things. If I was thinking, talking about queens, you can watch. There's lots of series that I can recommend. Many on Netflix. There's one that's called Great British Castles. That see many Norman castles with lots of history and historians. It's a great show. Then there is another called She Wolves that shows great women in British history. So yeah, that's something definitely to be proud of. And well, the Last Kingdom, as we said, Vikings. There are many things. Well, Robin Hood, and many other things that can help you. There is a fantastic TV series. Unfortunately, it's not on Netflix, but I guess you can find it. That is called The Tudors. Fantastic TV series that can really help you all understand all these periods. And really, by seeing this on a video, you can like understand and see how people lived, and like, I don't know, much more than with me just telling you. All right. So, well, thank you all very much for staying for such a long time. I mean, I know, I know that I speak a lot. I'm sorry. I truly apologize. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as we have enjoyed doing this. And well, I guess I see you next time for our next webinar. Thank you so much for being here. And well, again, see you.